The topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Geeks, Geezers, and Googleization Show, the home of Googleization Nation, where we talk with HR and business thought leaders about the crazy shift going on in the world of business, technology, and HR. Here's your host, Ira Wolf.
Hey, Michael. How are you?
Hello, Ira.
Hey, and welcome back.
Little tired, as I imagine you are.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And welcome back, everyone, to the Geeks, Geezers, and Googleization Show. A big shout out to Googleization Nation. We're helping people understand what it takes to live in the kind of the VUCA world: volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. We're certainly being tested on that. We were both, I think you were on the call. We were on the call about an hour ago. Yep. For the first adaptability quotient, the AQ Masterclass series. We're learning about resilience, about bouncing back, as Ross Thornley, who was a guest just a few weeks ago, talking about AQ. We were focused on resilience this morning, and I loved when he said we need to not talk about bouncing back, but bouncing forward. And yeah. I think that's absolutely the case. So we'll be talking a lot about that.
Well, one of the things that he said that I was excited to just echo here on your show is that the whole concept behind adaptability is teachable. And that's so different from so many of the things that you and I have worked with over the years. You know, abilities are pretty much hardwired. Yeah, you can maybe nudge them up a little bit over time, but they are what they are. Same with motivators and personality. But the adaptability piece is a learnable skill for those who choose to go down that path, which I think is incredibly powerful.
Yeah, and again, I don't want to take away, we've got a great speaker today, or a great guest today. We've got Josh Little, and he's going to be talking about the Zoom fatigue. But before we get there, and part of that is adaptability. So a lot of people in March, we've talked about that for 7 months, but even before that, but that people were overnight had to adapt. And what you do is you get into this spectrum of different stages of adaptability. It's just sort of like grief. And, you move from, I guess the earliest stages, some people just collapsed. They just fell apart. They stressed out, burnt out. And again, doesn't mean that there weren't good reasons: losing a job, getting sick, multiple things, but other people rebounded and did very well. So it went from collapsing to coping a lot, and most people are just getting by, and they say, "Oh, we're flexing," but emotionally they're just coping. And then we get to growing, and then we get to thriving, and ultimately we need to teach people, unfortunately, as you mentioned, things like resilience and grit and open-mindedness, or not open-mindedness, but growth mindset, mental flexibility, unlearning, all these things. These are actually skills that we sort of took for granted before, and now we're able to they've been able, through research and science, understand that we can actually teach people to become more adaptable. It's a skill, similar to what you and I sort of met on over motivation, the QMQ, quality of motivation.
Sure.
Is if you think of motivations intrinsic, is it intrinsic or external? Do I have to, dangle the carrot in front of somebody, or is it just somebody's hardwired to do that? And when you start looking at motivation as a skill, it changes everything. Now we can look at adaptability as a skill, and just like EQ, emotional intelligence, people looked at it. Well, some people are more emotional, some are less. No, there's a skill behind how we respond. So a lot of those things going on. A couple, as I said, we're going to bring on just really in a minute or so. I'm just looking at my notes here. We're going to bring on Josh Little, who's the CEO of Volley. We're also going to be entertaining at the end, after the break, Today, we're going to have Joyce Gioia again from the Herman Group. We're going to be talking about being ahead of the curve, Normal 2.0, and our focus today is going to be on leadership. So that should be fun. It went over really well last week. We had a great conversation with her. And,
yeah, she was great.
Yeah, and she was really excited about it. We got some great feedback, so we're going to continue that on. And she has the Herman Trend Alert, which comes out weekly. I just got that early this morning. And in that one, I'm sure we'll address that in the future one. It was about hotels in Normal 2.0. And
yeah,
what's all that? I mean, cruise ships are. I think I just saw that they wrote off 2020, and then somebody described it as a, does anybody want to go back in a giant petri dish? so they're gonna have to figure that out. Talked to somebody actually in my graduate class last night about organizational change. Somebody was talked about Broadway. When's that going to come back? And
and I have a lot of colleagues and performers I know who are just, from symphony performers to people who play in various theater productions. It's just they're toast for the moment.
Anybody who's been in Broadway, and I know a lot of theaters are like that, but Broadway seats were really built for people under 150 pounds and 5'6".
Right. Yeah. They kind of cram you in there.
Like the anatomy. I mean, it's the opposite of social distancing and safety. So
right.
That going to look like. So we got a long way to go, but we need to address something because certainly what has saved us, why we're able to be as productive as we are. Stock market's sky high again today, but the economy, for as bad as it is good. There's a lot of segments that are really thriving, and part of that is through technology. And using technology, one of the solutions was using Zoom, but people are getting fatigued. Hopefully. Yeah. This is nobody has to be on screen except you, me, and Josh, and eventually Joyce today. But I started at 9:00 this morning, and I've been on 3 calls, and fortunately one of them was just them, but I was just watching and observing. But the other 2, it's just back to back to back to back some days of being on screen, and it's exhausting. So with that, we're going to bring in on Josh Little. He is the CEO of Volley. This is the 4th startup he's had, very successful startups in the past. And he's going to talk about how do we kind of get beyond the death by meeting. Death by meeting used to be you walked, you just looked at your calendar and you went from room to room.
Oh, yes.
Now you say, well, that would be easy. We just pop on the screen. And but it's exhausting. It's exhausting for a lot of reasons.
I concur wholeheartedly, and I'm really looking forward to what he's got to say to help navigate this, because it's exhausting. You got to make sure your area's cleaned up. You've got all these other parameters that go into a Zoom meeting versus picking up a phone call. So,
yeah, absolutely. And that's it's exhausting even without worrying about all that stuff. So hopefully Josh is coming on board here.
There he is.
So,
hey guys.
Hey, good day.
Hey, Josh.
Good morning for you, Josh. I think you're out in Utah, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Said. Hopefully you got a couple hours sleep last night for our election.
Right. I gave up. I knew it was going to be a long night, so I chose sleep.
It's going to be a long couple of days, I think.
I think so.
I'm shocked. Actually, everybody was worried about the protests and violence, and at least at this point, the market's up a couple hundred points. So that doesn't solve the economy. Obviously, 60% of the population is not even invested in the stock market. So we still have a lot of struggles. But, as you heard the intro, I'm sure, we're all struggling with this Zoom fatigue. And so let's talk a little bit about that, because Zoom, in one respect, not just Zoom, but Zoom, Google Meet, Teams, whatever, saved a lot of companies. Especially people, consultants, speakers, trainers, but businesses. How do we communicate? How do we sell? How do we reach people? But going from it's a whole different experience, and going from one meeting to another, it's a whole different dynamic. So let's talk about that a little bit. And then I know your new venture has a solution, or part of a solution for that.
For sure. Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned the back to back to back. That's been a a badge of courage in the corporate world for many years, and we're hoping to change that. And I'm also glad you mentioned that Zoom is just the scapegoat here. Zoom happens to be kind of the market leader and got widely adopted because they built a great piece of technology, and better, but just marginally so. But that's all it needed to be, better than the others to get the adoption that it had. So Zoom fatigue is, you're right. It's also Skype fatigue and GoToMeeting fatigue and all of the others out there. Because for some of the reasons you mentioned, it is not natural, and we're missing that really important bit of synchronicity, that last 1 second of synchronicity that we're used to when we're sitting together in a room, or when we're standing next to each other, or even the telephone and cell phones have allowed us to have that synchronicity, that duplex. This little bit of timing that's off just makes a bit of a difference that makes the conversation seem awkward. And so,
but I guess I'll challenge that a little bit, because I can argue both sides of this. And somebody asked, I think I asked this in the last time. I have so many interviews and so many conversations besides my own.
Sure.
Somebody asked the question is, what would the pandemic response been without technology? And we can actually frame that as, what would our response be without Zoom? Or, and again, not specific to Zoom. Thank you, Google Meet. Thank you, Microsoft Teams. All these other ones. But what would the response have been without it?
It would have been disastrous, because the reality is we need to talk to move work forward. Conversation is the heart of what moves work forward. If you think about it, we have all of these other tools, email, chat, text, etc., which are great for quick information updates and sharing, files or links or whatnot. But to move work forward, we need to talk. And the convention has been either you really only have two options. You can either jump on a call or you can set up a meeting. And while both of those are interruptive, being able to do those virtually has sort of saved companies, because that's really been the only way we can talk. So we've seen an increase, a large increase in virtual meetings on platforms like Zoom, but we've also seen just a general uptick in the percentage of time spent in meetings, which has increased 13% just since social distancing started. And that's on top of 2 decades of the time spent in meetings increasing by 8 to 10% a year. It's just kind of this runaway train, which to which you had mentioned, Ira, it becomes a back-to-back situation, which gets in the way of productivity.
So let me roll this back a little bit, because you talk, and again, some people may not understand when we talk about synchronicity is. And obviously, we're here together. We're all in the same spot. And I had done the podcast for 2 years, just audio. And now that it's video, I actually really like it, because you get to see the people. Now, at first, it was like, oh gosh, I've actually got to put more than a T-shirt on. I've got to make sure the background's right. I don't have to do all this stuff. So to me, it seems even more synchronous than a telephone. Why do you say it's not as synchronous as a telephone?
Good question. Yeah, when I say synchronous, I mean time, at the same time. So I'm a singer, and one of the first things every school and choir wanted to do right after social distancing was a virtual choir. Let's get on Zoom and sing. But they quickly realized, oh, that doesn't work, because when I'm speaking or singing, I can't hear you, and we might be just a second off, a half a second off, but that's enough to make it sound bad, right? So that's that little gap in synchronicity. What you're talking about, the difference between phone and a video call like this, is all about the getting the full spectrum of communication, the full pipe of richness. It's been debated, but somewhere between 70 to 93% of what what is communicated through tone of voice and body language holding about 55% of that. So the 55% the video adds is valuable because I could say something and be looking off or have a sad look on my face or a troubled look on my face, and that means something totally different as if I'm emoting and smiling at you. So video does add a lot, but it's that synchronicity that wears on us. It's the lack of synchronicity. It's I can't quite interrupt, or you can't quite stop me. And then if we stop, then there's this gap, and then we're kind of waiting who's going to talk next. And we're actually amazing as human beings. We're amazing at this dance called conversation, so amazing that there exists this 200 millisecond gap between turns in a conversation. And it exists across all languages, all cultures. We know to wait about 200 milliseconds, which is 1/5 of a second. And studies show that if you wait just 600 milliseconds, still less than a second, you trigger what seems like an awkwardly long pause, which causes you to think, are they understanding what I'm saying? Do they like what I'm saying? Do they not? It causes you to think all of these things. And so this less than a second difference adds up to a lot of friction, which leads to this Zoom fatigue.
So it's really interesting because in a little bit, some of it was preparation, some of it was just happenstance. But I had done a podcast in 2010. I started it, and it was Blog Talk Radio for the if you remember that. And you'd go on, and I don't even remember how I think I don't remember. I guess we accessed it through the computer.
I think you called in actually because the audio quality on that.
Yeah, I think you could call, right. I think
you'd call in, and then the computer was like the interface to kind of pull everything together, I believe.
I did it for about 12 weeks. 10 or 12 weeks, and then it was like, this is, I'm busy this week, and then it filtered out. But what was interesting, when I went back, I found my files, and I found one of the files was, I don't remember the exact title, but it was visual, they didn't even call it virtual meetings. It was like visual communication for the future. And I had on it a startup. He was a CEO of a startup. His name was, and I actually I just connected with him again on LinkedIn. His name was J.W. Penland, and now he actually has a venture capital firm. That's what he does. And I said, hey, look at what I found. And his technology group was called VisiMeet. It was visual meetings. And his response was, if we had COVID-10 instead of COVID-19, there might not be a Zoom. There'd be a VisiMeet.
That's right.
Zoom went from 10 million to 300 million users. I think between December and March or April.
Right.
So timing is, and you know this better than I do. In the startup world, and especially technology, sometimes timing is everything.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and we're there. So let's talk about, you've got a solution. I mean, we can beat Zoom fatigue, and I'm sure everybody agrees that they're there. How do we get out of it? What are you working on? What are we doing? What are some ways that people can unfatigue?
For sure. Well, if you Google Zoom fatigue, you'll see a number of articles, all well-intentioned, that say things like, take breaks, turn off your camera, do all of these things that equal Zooming less or talking less, right? And the answer isn't in talking less, because I believe strongly, and I think all would agree, that conversation or communication is the way that we move work forward. We have to talk in order to make work move forward. This is why executives spend 28 hours a week in meetings, yet 17% of them feel that meetings are not a productive use of time. They need that time face-to-face to get buy-in, to make decisions, to do all of the leading that needs to happen in meetings. So the answer is not talking less. In fact, also another data point, SAP just launched an initiative to that all meetings need to be either 25 minutes or 50 minutes. There's no such thing as a 30 or 60-minute meeting. So that way we don't have back-to-back meetings, right? That's a good thing, right? But I say if meetings are really flexible like that, why not 5-minute meetings? Why not 2-minute meetings if we can just suddenly compress the time, right? And that might be a solution. But as I've seen companies move remotely, as I've over the last decade and a half experimented with remote work with my companies, and sort of COVID coming on the scene and the social distancing, it's sort of sharpened my focus to a solution of this problem. And over the last couple of years, when you talk about timing, I've fallen in love with asynchronous video communication on several different platforms with friends and family. It turns out that conversations are turn-based. We take turns, just like we've done in this conversation. You've taken turns, I've taken turns, back and forth. But only because of the constraints of the physical world and the traditional world have we needed to take those turns synchronously at the same time, meaning I have to listen to you while you're talking, you have to listen to me while I'm talking. And with technology, we don't have to do that. We can actually break up those turns and allow those turns to be taken when we have time in between, so that we can open up our schedule and reduce this back-to-back-to-back interruptive schedule. So what I've been working on is a conversation hub for work called Volley that allows you to move work forward with asynchronous video conversations. So I can, record my Volley, which is just like maybe my stand-up for the day. We do asynchronous stand-ups every day as an engineering team, and we give our updates. Or I can, say to hey team, I was thinking about this, and what do you think? Should we get the blue t-shirts or the white t-shirts? And then everybody can chime in when they want. I don't have a need for that answer right now. We don't need to have a meeting for this. We don't need to make this time and place bound. But there's a lot of conversation that fits in between Slack and Zoom, so to speak. Slack meaning written text communication, and Zoom synchronous video communication. There is certainly a place for synchronous. You wouldn't want to fire someone over a text message, right? You just wouldn't do that. You'd want to talk live.
You have to tell a few companies that. I just saw it. Just did it the other day again. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. That came out. One of the newsletters.
Any emotionally charged conversation, you want to reserve synchronous for those sorts of things. But there's all of this conversation, all of this communication that falls in between. Written communication is slow because I can speak 7 to 8 times faster than I can compose business communication. Even it's not a matter of typing, it's a matter of thinking and processing and getting the words out, right? And then because you tend to perfect that. Emails, even text messages. I know friends who obsess over getting everything right in their Slack messages. But when written communication fails to be adequate, what do? We need to talk. And if we really only have 2 options, jump on a call or set up a meeting, then we're going to have back-to-back synchronous meetings all day, which are going to interrupt productivity. 65% of executives say that meetings stand in direct opposition of them completing their individual work. And now we've just increased that by 13% and increased the fatigue as well.
So how does, so again, for those who are out there, and again, there's a lot of people that, Zoom was this new technology, learning how to use it. So in addition to just the fatigue of being in these meetings, they had to learn the functionality. How do we do that? How do we set it up? How do we log on? How do we use all the features? But there, in fact, I've gotten to the point, and I think this is a little bit what you're talking about. Client calls me and says they're having trouble. And, before we'd walk them through, or we'd set up a call, but I can just as easily click the button. I use, there's Loom and there's Dub and, the number of their programs, and I'll just record a screenshot and walk them through exactly what it is. And it takes the same amount of time to do it, probably less time, and send it to them. And I get a tremendous response from that. favorable response, because it didn't, as you said, it doesn't require them to find a quiet place, to get the lighting right, to be on the screen. Maybe they're involved with something else. They can just watch it and get the answer.
Yeah, absolutely. And you also gain a number of superpowers when you move from synchronous to asynchronous. You now get some pretty cool advantages. One, that you didn't have to schedule something on your calendar, so now your calendar opens up. But speed is a huge advantage, because I can watch your Loom synchronous video or asynchronous video at 2x, and I just took your 10-minute presentation and watched it in 5. I just 2x my productivity for that little segment of time, right? And as we're starting to use tools, podcast platforms, very few people that I talk to are actually listening to things on 1x. We're 1.25, 1.5, and depending on who's speaking, there might need to be a different speed. But you also have the ability to stop time and think, which is another superpower of asynchronous. Educational research shows anytime you can wait 3 seconds, anytime a student can wait 3 seconds before responding, the quality of their response dramatically improves, because they have that time to think. And so savvy instructors build in this think time, this wait time, where a student can process. Because in reality, because of that 200 millisecond gap in between our turns in a conversation, I'm building my response while you're speaking. And I was just doing this when you were speaking last. I thought you were going to go to somewhere where, like, how does Volley work? And I got my phone. And
that's where we're going next. And we got a couple minutes here. So how does Volley work? How does it differ? How is it different than what I just described, or from a Slack, or from or Discord, or some of these other channels?
Yeah, so I mean, the big difference is asynchronous, and what that looks like. We have a mobile app right now on iPhone. We're building desktop and Android as well, and we're about to launch the iOS app. But these are all of my conversations, just like text messages. And here I'll embarrassingly go into one with my wife, and you can see the video is running there. And these are our turns in this conversation, in the timeline of the conversation. So this is our conversation over time. Never before has conversation been able to be recorded, and Volley just does that naturally. So I can view, this is my wife making fish lips. Oh, she's going to be embarrassed that I showed this.
Oh, you're going to pay. You're going to pay.
I'm going to pick a better one next time, but I can record a Volley by hitting record and saying, "Hi, sweetie, love you." I'm giving a non-business example. I got to think of a better conversation to jump in, but then that drops in the timeline. On this side, and the conversation expands. So this format of communicating is great for brainstorming, because creativity doesn't happen on a schedule. It doesn't happen Friday at 5 o'clock or Tuesday at 2:30. It happens when you're in the shower or in these random places. So you can quickly record,
iPhone 12 to go in the shower with it.
Yeah, true. Waterproof, right? So it allows you all of these other things, not to mention inclusivity, because group conversations are bad for inclusivity. We've all been in meetings where someone can't stop talking and other people can't get a word in edgewise, and they go silent, and they feel like they're not heard. And the beauty of asynchronous is everyone can hit the record button. Everyone has an equal opportunity to hit record and to chime in and to give their 2 cents, because we're not constrained by this time box in this physical space. So
is your platform then just 1-to-1, or could you do 3, 5, 10 people asynchronous at the same time as part of a conversation?
Oh yeah, for sure. You can have, just like text messages, you can have text messages with a group thing, multiple people. Yeah. So here's our engineering updates conversation with all of my co-founders, and cool. All of us chiming in on engineering updates, or our stand-up conversation, or just our general sort of random put anything there because Slack has kind of pioneered that you just need a catch-all, a general sort of conversation to put everything in.
So we're coming up on our break and the end of the segment, Josh. How can people get Volley? How can they download it, or where can they download it? And how can they get a hold of you if they want to have any questions?
Yeah, thanks. volleyapp.com. We're not quite launched. We're still in private beta. We have hundreds of companies that are kind of on the wait list. So we're slowly bringing them in and letting them adopt the tool while we're learning and just polishing. So it's not publicly available yet, but will be in the coming weeks. So if you go to volleyapp.com, you can join the wait list, or you can find me on LinkedIn, LinkedIn/LittleJosh.
Yeah, I saw that. I was looking. I kept typing in for Josh Little, and I saw it's Little Josh. So we'll have to bring you back to get that story out, how you became Little Josh. But I appreciate it very much, Josh. I appreciate you being here. I know a lot of people are suffering for it. I like that idea, and even without that, I mean, just the idea of shooting videos. A lot of people may not have thought about that, but I'm excited to do that. I can see some immediate needs for it. So I'm going to try to get on the waiting list and hopefully I'll get notification when it's available.
Well, I know a guy, so I can help you get in.
Hey. Cool. Thank you, Jeff. Very much. Stay safe.
Thanks, Tara.
Really appreciate it. Thanks for being part
Thanks
of
so much.
Equalization.
Great stuff.
Right there. So we are going to take a short break here. We're going to hear from our sponsor, Success Performance Solution. And when we come back, we're going to have our celebrity futurist, Joyce Gioia from the Herman Group. We're going to be talking this week how to be ahead of the curve. We're going to be talking about leadership in Normal 2.0. Stay tuned. We'll see you in 2 minutes. Hiring top talent shouldn't be left up to the roll of the dice. And yet, that's exactly what many organizations do. They roll the dice, cross their fingers, and pray for a better outcome. Hiring the right employees the first time is much too important and way too costly to leave to a game of chance. Your employees and your customers deserve better. For 25 years, Success Performance Solution has been helping small and medium-sized businesses hire smarter. They offer pre-employment and leadership assessments from typing and data entry to C-suite competence. Whether it's production, sales, healthcare, call centers, or management, Success Performance Solutions can help. Visit their website at www.successperformancesolutions.com to schedule a free demo or call 800-803-4303.
A lot of you might be feeling like you're standing in deep shift. But do you know what grows and rises out of deep shift? Opportunity. To successfully navigate the shift to the new normal, each of us must learn to rapidly adapt to the speed of change. Some of us are hardwired for this. Others, not so much. That's where Success Performance Solutions can help. Success Performance Solutions is now your AQ headquarters. Whether you are personally struggling with the next chapter in your career or wondering how ready your team is for fast, disruptive change, our AQ assessment and coaching will provide you a detailed, scientifically backed roadmap to guide you into the new normal. Optimize your adaptability today. Contact Success Performance Solutions about evaluating your team's change readiness or joining our upcoming AQ Masterclass. Visit successperformancesolutions.com or call us at 800-803-4303.
Hey, welcome back. Hey, welcome back, everyone. This is in Googleization Show and our new segment, Ahead of the Curve. Hopefully, Joyce will be joining us very shortly. There she is. Hey, Joyce. How are you? Can't hear you. You're on mute. Joyce, you're on mute.
There we go.
I said, I'm great, as great as I can be on about 1.5 hours of sleep.
Yeah.
Join the club.
Yeah, I didn't have my, well, actually, I don't wear my Fitbit anymore, but I think if I would have worn it, that's about what I had of sleep, even when I was attempting to get more than that. So.
I looked at Andrea Mitchell this morning on television and I said, oh my God, that's how I feel.
Now you got me curious.
Oh, well, she had circles under her eyes.
Understandably.
She had had an hour and a half of sleep, too.
Yeah, I think I woke up last night. I fell asleep with the TV on. I think I woke up and it was like 3:00, and Chris Cuomo was just coming on, just starting. I mean, when do you ever see these, any of them on the middle of the night? That group.
Yeah.
But welcome back. Hey, we had a great response.
Great to be back with you, Ira and Michael.
Yeah, and we saw we had the Herman Trend Alert. Got it this morning, and I think it was hotels, right? Hotels in 2.0.
Yep. Hotel hacks. Yeah.
Yeah, hotel hacks. So I can't wait. In one of the future weeks, we'll get into that. But I know we got a lot to talk about, and what an appropriate timing with leadership in the new normal or normal 2.0, whatever that's going to be. And this was from a couple weeks ago in the Trend Alert, Herman Trend Alert.
October 22nd, actually.
Yeah, okay, so people can go up to the website, which is scrolling across the bottom, and get it from the archive. But you talked about a couple different things. You talked about purposeful leadership, empathy, creativity, innovation. Let's put that in perspective. I mean,
where would you like to start, Ira?
Well, I guess, the question is, I mean, people have been studying leadership forever. We've been around for a while. Mike, a little bit less, but long enough. There's a million different theories of leadership. So I guess one is, I think we'll all agree that going forward, it's going to be different. But what's different about the different skills? I mean, why aren't some of the good old standard off-the-shelf leadership things gonna fly? Why isn't it gonna work anymore?
And they are, except that some are more important than others. And I'm going to start with something that you happen to be very enthusiastic about, which is agility. Mm-hmm. And AQ, as you call it, or agility quotient, is even more important than it's ever been before, because we need to be able, it's actually adaptability, right?
Yeah, it's, I was going to say, I didn't want to interrupt you. It's adaptability.
That's what I meant.
Yeah,
it's more important because things are changing so fast that we need to be able to adapt quickly. And that is a key leadership trait, I think, for this new normal. And it's not like we're going to be there, it's like we're there. And as far as I'm concerned, this is normal 2.0. And what happens post-pandemic is normal 3.0. And in fact, I'm going to be doing a presentation for the Asia Pacific Futurist Network on our post-pandemic future in normal 3.0. Because it too is going to be different. We've talked about why I call it normal 2.0, the fact that it's an evolution of normal, the fact that it's not like we're going back to something, like back to a normal or to a new normal, but we're going forward into a new version of normal, at least in my view. And there are many aspects of leadership, which, yes, admittedly were important before, but are even more important now because we're in a time where our employees, our followers, need us to be more for them than we ever had to be before.
So I'm looking at this. I'm reading a book. It's called The Adaptation Advantage. New book, great book. And there was a graph, and it just happened to be sitting here. And underneath that, the description of it is human adaptation is linear. Technology change is exponential. And I think that's important because even in the graduate class I started to teach last night, is that there's still people perceive their changes are, if we make a gradual change, it's enough. And it used to be. The problem is when the world is changing at an incredibly faster rate than it ever did before, which comes up with the VUCA, the volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. even if you are changing, you've gotten so much better than you used to be at change. It's still not enough, which then the responsibility, and this is what I was trying to teach the students, and again, it's a graduate class, but most of them are 25 to 31 years old, so they don't have 20 or 30 years of life experience. It's not an executive leadership program.
But they have some life experience.
But they've had some.
Right.
But they were still kind of micro, and it's like, you guys, we're counting on you to be the leaders of the future.
Really?
And to be a leader of the future, you have to do two things. One is you have to understand how to adapt at the rate of change, and secondly, how do you get other people to do it? If you're a manager of it, you don't have to worry about it. If you're a leader, you have to get people to acknowledge that we're not going back.
And to embrace your vision for the future so that they can support you in helping it to become a reality.
So again, let's go back to a couple of things you talked about.
Sure.
One of the things that definitely changed, and again, I think this is definitely, if you went back to what leadership was in the 50s and 60s and 70s, more authoritarian, empathy was a thing. Empathy was a weakness. That was a vulnerability.
Yeah, empathy is so important, Ira, that I did a whole week's trend alert on different aspects of empathy and what is empathy. And we can address that sometime in the future. But empathy is vital. It's critical for leaders right now because people are suffering. People are suffering financially. People are suffering emotionally. Some of our employees have actually lost loved ones. Mm-hmm. People are suffering socially because they can't connect with others. I mean, there's so many ways that people are suffering. And so leaders need to be even more empathetic than they ever were before so that they can see things from their employees' perspective and help to support that employee through whatever he or she is going through.
So what are some of the other things? I mean, and again, we got like 5 more minutes, and there's a lot. But
there's a lot that we could talk about. Yeah, sure. I think there always is, isn't there?
Yeah, I think we could talk about creativity and innovation. I think people get that part. We need to be doing that. But the purposeful leadership, I think, is also very, very important. And again, that tends to resonate with people. It's what people need right now, rather than just handing them a solution. Or fixing a problem that they've got. I mean, so talk about purposeful leadership.
Having a purpose makes us feel like we're contributing to something greater than ourselves. And when our purpose is aligned with the purpose of the organization, that's when the magic happens.
Can you give an example of that? Because I know you always have these stories in that of an organization that did that. Because again, people are struggling right now, and
surely
sometimes
one of our companies that has been an employer of choice for more years than any other company is called Sedgwick, and it used to be called Sedgwick CMS, which stands for Claims Management Services, and those folks, they have 80,000 now employees worldwide, speaking 14 or 17 or 24 or 42 different languages. I mean, it boggles the mind. And what they've done is something that I talk about in my book, Experience Rules, because what they've done is to align their employer brand with their external brand. And it all works together so that the employees feel invested in living that brand, and their brand is Caring Counts. And it's a leitmotif that goes through every aspect, whether it's their relationships with their suppliers or their relationships with their employees or their relationships with their clients or their relationships with their clients who are the claimants, they live caring. And from the CEO down to the frontline person, they live the purpose of caring for others,
So-
which I think is just, I think it's amazing.
How do we, so again, I can hear this, I've been around a while, and people go back and go, we're reading the book. We're reading a book on purposeful leadership, and we're going through our strategic plan, and we just came up with the new, we came up with our slogan. Here's our mission, then.
Well, the thing is that most companies these days are not even looking at missions. They're exchanging purpose for mission.
But how do we move beyond? How does a company move beyond the tagline that marketing came up with? That
Right.
And everybody says, "Hey, we just did a survey, and everybody said we need to have more caring." So that's our new buzzword.
Here's the way you do it is you have to make sure that everyone in the organization, from the top executive all the way down to the frontline person, is on board with that. You can't just show up and say, this is what we're going to do. From now on, we're going to live caring counts and expect it to happen. It has to be conversations, CEO to leadership team, to middle managers, to frontline supervisors, to frontline people. Everyone has to have that conversation. How do we make that our brand live? And in that conversation, we need to make sure that people actually believe that that's what they want to do. And if you do it that way, it's going to work. If you do it any other way, it's not.
And last week we talked about culture add and culture fit. So, I mean, it really, this is a great segue, with that, of understanding if people hired people to what the world used to be, but you need to hire people. Not only do they value what you value, but what do they add to that equation? If they're just fitting, it's passive. If they add to it, it means they feel important. It's part of that. It's proactive. They want to contribute to that.
Exactly. And it's about skating to where the puck is going to be. And that has to do with strategic workforce planning.
Yeah.
So we don't want to only hire people for today. We want to hire people who can grow into the positions that we're going to need in the future.
Joyce, we're coming up toward the end. You and I can always, we can talk forever.
Forever.
And we're just at service, and I know we'll do big back in. How can people get a hold of you? And what are we talking about next week?
My email address is joyce@hermangroup.com. And my website to reach me is hermangroup.com, or you can reach me by going to hermantrendalert.com, and they can sign up for the weekly Herman Trend Alert. Next week, if we're going to do it in order, we would talk about empathy, the critical importance of empathy in Normal 2.0.
That sounds like a good segue. We're definitely going to need that, because I think however the election turns out, we're all going to have to stand in somebody else's shoes. So that may be, and it's way beyond that, I know, but it's a good start. So that'll be our therapy for next week. Joyce, thank you.
It's a very good start. And thank you for this opportunity, as usual, Ira, Michael. It was great being with you all, and I look forward to our conversation next week.
Excited to have you back.
See you next week.
Thanks.
So Michael, we've had a busy day already. We've had our AQ.
We've had lots of Zoom meetings, lots of calls,
we've learned how to resolve our fatigue. I really like. I didn't think it in that perspective, but I like that asynchronous idea.
What it reminded me of? We just didn't have a chance to get into it.
Here, so we need to go pretty quick.
Well, it reminded me of Snapchat, but basically more in a corporate setting, just sending out a message and then having people on a conversation chain. So it's very cool technology.
Yeah, and I don't know if you use Slack or not, but I know there's a couple other tools like that. But I was on a call the other day, and they said, "Oh yeah, we just leave the Slack audio on for like 2 hours a day." And people,
so you're like in the same room. Interesting.
Yeah, very, very interesting. So anyway, I want to thank everybody. We don't want to fatigue them too much here. We're gonna close here. I want to thank everybody again for listening to and watching now the Geeks, Geezers, and Googlization show. I got my guest co-host Michael Spramuli along with me, and we now have our new segment with Joyce Gioia at the end of each show about keeping ahead of the curve. I really appreciate that. If you missed the show, you want to have a replay, or you rather prefer to get it on your podcast, we're on almost every podcast: Apple, Google, Spotify, iHeart, you name it. We are there. So until next week, 1 p.m. Eastern Time, don't left the shift. Eat your plans.